You know, there's some people that get just about everything incorrect, wrong. We've all been there. We've all had the kid to get up and say, I'm done. And you look over on the table and you see the plate. None of the vegetables and fruit has been eaten. Actually, nothing's been touched on the whole entire plate. Or the kid that gets up and says, I'm done with my homework. And you go to check the homework. And you see a little squiggly mark and an erasure. But nothing else there. It's like, I know this kid says that they're done eating, but they haven't eaten. I know this kid says that they're done with their homework, but there's no answers on the paper. You know, it's all in their head. It's an imagination. And well, it's way out in nature. You know, we all knew kids like that. So it's quite natural that, well, kids that are like that, well, they grow up to be adults that are like that too. Just about everything they say and just about everything that they do is, well, the incorrect, the wrong way to go about doing things. And one of these people, well, they got a little bit famous, only in conservative circles for doing this. Well, this person's name is Candace Owens. And well, just about everything that she ever commentates on, which is entirely the black community. I mean, she never has a critical word to say about the white community or any other community, except for, well, if they happen to be brown. I mean, she did attack AOC too for, well, struggling to pay for rent in DC. Now, anybody's ever been to DC and lived there, they know that rent is very, well, expensive in DC, especially on a, well, congressional salary. A lot of the Congress members end up, well, turning their congressional office into their, like, living quarters because rent is so expensive. You know, you just can't rent anywhere in DC. It's a weird city. Um, anyway, she attacked AOC for, well, struggling to, well, talk about the costs of rent there and struggling with rent costs. You gotta pay a lot for food too. And well, she neglected to mention that, well, she had a struggle with rent too when she rented an apartment for $3,500 when she was 28 years old and lived in the apartment rent free for 6 months. And well, when it was time to pay up the rent, you know, $3,500 times 6 months. When it was time to pay that all up, she didn't want to pay the rent. Claimed that the apartment gave her mold sickness and threatened to sue the landlord. You know, AOC never did that. That was Candace Owens that did that. And you know, miraculously, after right about the time as well, she was about getting ready to get kicked out of the apartment. She did a magical switcheroo, and she became a conservative darling. You know, after being a liberal, like, well, just a liberal attack dog. I mean, she talked about the former president's penis size and how it was small. You never heard the purple people's owl mention anything about that. Although I will say the white supremacist white males have small dick energy. That is true. That probably was true, but she couldn't say that now because, well, she's over with the white supremacists. Anyway, yeah, just about everything is, well, inaccurate, false, not true that she says, especially about the black community. Let's take, for instance, well, this proper notion that somehow the only real ill with the black community, the reason you see rampant crime and, well, single parent households is because, well, you know, the lack of morality in the black structure. Somehow there's no marriages. There's no, well, there's no people that care about family. family values, Christianity. Nobody in the black community cares about that as much anymore. And that's why you have rampant crime. You know, that's the notion she proffers up. And she says, well, that's the problem with the black community. But well, what she neglects to say is that's the problem with the black community now. And maybe that's in her mind, that's a problem. But let's go and run with that hypothesis that it's a problem now. But well, what she leaves out is, has it always been a problem? And you can't say that it has. So she never talks about the past. She always talks about what's happening in the present. Because in order to talk about the past, you would know that, well, her argument doesn't stand up to itself. There was a time when the vast majority of African Americans in America were married and in two-parent households, more so even than the white community, statistically speaking. And you know what happened? Systemic racism happened. Systematic destruction of the black family. She knows that. And it would happen because of white supremacy in the United States government. The things that she doesn't want to talk about. Mass incarceration, drugs being pumped into the inner cities, all of those kind of things, all of that. And now, well, she doesn't talk about, the Tulsa Race Massacre and Black Wall Street being decimated by white mobs, vigilante terrorists, and white Nazis. She doesn't talk about massacres that happen all across America, because, well, it would disprove her point that it hasn't happened before. The black people haven't been, respectable, still met the ire of white America. Candace Owens, that argument that you're using all the time about, black people just have to be more, family orientated. It's already happened once before. It didn't make a difference in America. And if it happened again, it wouldn't make a difference in America. So let's be honest and cut the bullshit. So that's the first problem with Candace Owens. That, she talks about the present tense and how horrible it is, and brings up things that black people should do, as though they haven't already done those things before, and it met with the same, devastating outcome. How religious were black people during slavery? Come on, get out of here with all of that bullshit. The second problem I have with Candace Owens is, she seems like she goes after, only black women. She always viciously attacks black women, never gives black women the benefit of the doubt. Her latest victim is now the Chicago mayor, Lori Lightfoot. Somehow, get this, all of the homicides and violence that's happening in Chicago is the current mayor's fault. Lori Lightfoot hasn't been in office for, I don't think, longer than a year. So you're telling me somebody who hasn't been serving longer than a year is responsible for all the violence that's currently occurring now in Chicago? That's how they always do. They leave you a pile of horse manure at your doorstep. And then, if you've got like 10 shovels and you're using all 10 of your shovels trying to shovel off the horse manure from your deck, you're not doing it fast enough. We all know Chicago was a shit show that you left Lori Lightfoot. So don't talk about Lori Lightfoot as though she's the culprit in this. No, there were mayors previous to Lori Lightfoot who were far more responsible for what's occurring now in Chicago. And we all know who they are, but they won't get mentioned because, on top of it being sexist, and on top of it being racist, it's misogynistic. If it was a male, they probably wouldn't say all of these things that they're saying about Lori Lightfoot. I think Lori Lightfoot is doing an excellent job. And if Candace Owens thinks that Lori Lightfoot is not doing a good job, she can move to Chicago and she can run up against Lori Lightfoot, because that would be a doozy of an election and a debate. She would get trounced and laughed out of Chicago. Matter of fact, she couldn't even get into Chicago. Candace Owens has so much to yap about Chicago. Baby, you couldn't get into Chicago if you paid to get in. Nobody would let you in. None of you fuckers can get into Chicago. That's what you're jealous about. You can't get in. All of you races, you can leave. And the ones that want to come in to do some bad, just try it, baby boo. It's not going to end well. So it's a little bit of jealousy that they can't go. You know, for somebody that talks about the city all the time and never been there, I know Chicago. I lived there for many, many years. You know, Candace Owens, well, she's never actually visited, I don't think. And if she has, well, it was probably just the airport. You know, Candace Owens, your problem is, well, you're always attacking black women of status and standard. You know, if it wasn't Lori Lightfoot, it was the current vice president, Kamala Harris. You know, she's doing a horrible job. Even though she's only been vice president for, well, we're in June, and well, they got inaugurated January 20th. So about 5 months she's been vice president. And well, I guess she was supposed to magically turn everything around because, well, all of these decades, 400 years of male bullshit that she's got to shovel up through, I guess she's supposed to do that in 5 months. You know, unrealistic expectations for women. Misogynistic to the hilt. You know, and then it was Cardi B. She's not setting a good example for women, you know, twerking and doing all that gyrating. I mean, can we talk about Elvis and all that hip gyrating? You know, a lot of people had complaints about Elvis back in the day. He was shaking his hips too much. It was ruining kids. You know, that's who Candace Owens sounds like nowadays. One of those critics of Elvis Presley. Because that's how great that Cardi B is going to go down in history. She's one of the greatest female MCs, if not the greatest, alive. And well, you can't dethrone somebody by just talking bullshit about them, even though Candace Owens thinks that that's what she can do. And then this one hurt my little heart, because this is our little precious little baby, Naomi Osaka. You know, now, not only is Naomi Osaka a world-class tennis superstar, she's sweet. She's a darling. She's one of those people that, well, saw an issue and spoke out. She could have remained silent. She could have, well, said one thing and been done with it. No, she constantly used her platform to spread good, to spread awareness, to spread love. That's what you want a young person to do. And well, this is somebody who can be an excellent role model for young women and girls all over the world. Naomi Osaka. And she attacked the woman for wanting to take a mental health break. Now, full disclosure, I was banned from Instagram for attacking Candace Owens, for defending Naomi Osaka and mental health, and individuals who struggle with mental health. I will never apologize for defending Naomi Osaka from Candace Owens' vicious attack, not only against her as a person, but against every individual who struggles or has ever struggled with mental health episodes or issues. You know, we've all got to take a stand eventually. We got to stand up for what's right, no matter what the sacrifice might be to us as individuals or persons. Because ultimately, that's what it all boils down to, your purpose. I don't feel bad at one iota about attacking Candace Owens for what she said about Naomi Osaka. You can call it bullying or harassment. I don't give a fuck. If you attack somebody who's a nice, decent, caring, kind, loving soul, and plus you disparage millions of people who struggle with mental health, it was my pleasure to get banned off of Instagram for doing just that. Candace Owens, we want you to be critical of, well, the white community. You talk about the violence, black on black crime. Crime rates and violence and homicides are going up, largely in the white community. You don't ever hear you come on Tucker Carlson's show and mention that domestic homicide violence is through the roof in the white community, meaning the white husbands and white boyfriends are killing their girlfriends and wives at an alarming rate right now, currently, in the United States. You never say these things. Why? Because, well, it's not appealing to people like Tucker Carlson's ears, even though it's statistically factually true. And you love statistics. You know, I don't like bullshitters. Candace Owens gets everything wrong about the black community and about black women. And she takes pleasure in attacking the black community and black women. And we all know that, well, historically this has happened. You know, there were black African slaves who fought on the side of the Confederacy, killing black Union officers who fought on the side of the Union against the Confederacy and for emancipation and freedom from slavery. So we know that, well, it can be deeply ingrained, the hatred towards other people, especially black people. And when you, well, exist on a planet that's anti-black and, well, anti-black to the core, you know that, well, even some black people are going to be anti-black and hate, well, blackness. They might be black themselves, but they don't see themselves as black. They see themselves as anything besides being black. You know, it's an anti-black planet. And, well, closer you are to white, closer you are to right. Because, well, they used to say, white makes right. You know, Candace Owens, she's an embarrassment. She's a shame. She's real, well, a sad case and being incorrect about just about everything. And then the cherry on top, Brexit, you know, the whole movement where black people were supposed to lead the Democratic Party and vote for a Nazi like Donald Trump for re-election. That whole thing. The kicker to that whole thing, the slogan, you know, Kanye West said he felt like she used him. And she did. She used somebody with a mental health issue. And, well, that's what she does. She used her landlord to not pay rent for 6 months. And then, well, tried to blame it on mold to avoid not paying rent. You know, she's a user. But the kicker is, Brexit, the term. It actually came from a black woman who wanted nothing to do with, well, what Candace Owens is preaching. And, you know, she didn't even give credit to, from, well, stealing another person's slogan, a black woman. So you stole the slogan, Brexit, from a black woman, and you never mentioned that to the African American community. And yet you talk about being pro-black on the whitest network in the United States of America. Candace Owens, there's no answer on your test paper, and there's still food on your plate. We know it can be hard to learn these kind of things, but, well, learning is a process that, well, hopefully lasts forever